Isn't she ticking over nicely? Now, I've got up to the stage where I've fully broken the engine in, and what I'm going to do is, I'm going to talk through the breaking in process, but I'm going to do it in sort of tanks, if you see what I mean. So it'll give you each stage of what I'm doing. Now then, for the first 2 tanks, here's my first little tip. I'll just turn the truck around a second. Here we go. Right, what I usually do for the first 2 tanks, before I do anything at all, I disconnect the spur wheel, or if I can't do that, I'll loosen the engine and pull it back so it's off the spur wheel. I'll also disconnect the brake here, or the brake on the other model, and I'll also disconnect the throttle linkage, which is down here. Once I've done that, where the carburetor is, where actually the throttle actually pushes the in, it's under the air filter there, I just put a little bit of tape over where I've taken the linkage off. This pushes the half moon to the correct position where you want it. So what we've got is the engine completely disconnected and the carburetor on idle, as you might say. After that, what I do is I start her up. She's going to cough, she's going to splutter, she's probably going to cut out again, and this is because the engine's tight. What we're trying to do is marry, as you might say, the piston to the piston sleeve, and what will happen is little microscopic scars will form up the sides, and this is where the oil gets in, and the oil lubricates the engine, and the engine should get slightly looser, if you see what I mean. But for the first 2 tanks, as I said, what I do is I disconnect the spur gear and all the linkage on it, and it just makes it a lot easier because you haven't got the wheels flying around, you haven't got anything vibrating around. You can really get into the engine and get down to the idle needle or the low needle and get the engine running the way you want it. You should be able to sort of, like, after the first tank, maybe the first tank and a half, it might just sort of settle down into a little routine where the tone actually just becomes a bit more steady, as you might say. So you may be able to do another tank if you really want to, it's entirely up to you. But the main aim of the thing is just to get the engine so it idles quite happily on its own, and on this engine it idles so well that the actual pinion gear doesn't even go around. So once you've done that, I put 2 tanks straight through and did that process, and now onto the 3rd tank. So I let it cool down, I put all the linkage back on again, so I've got brakes, I've got throttle, and I've got the spur gear back on again. Fill the tank up, start it from cold, and what I do then is sort of take it up to half throttle, maybe 3/4 throttle, and see what happens. And what you might find happen is, at first, with the engine being a bit tight, when you put your foot to the floor, or down to the floor, as you might say, you're pulling your throttle backwards, as you might say, the engine will sometimes kind of splutter, and you just got to give it time just to loosen up, and it should just get better and better. So you go into sort of like the 5th and the 6th tanks, and your engine should be quite loose by now, and it might be loose to an extent where, if you're leaving it on idle, it's actually trying to engage with the pinion gear and push it forward because it's a bit looser. So you might have to adjust your idle back in a bit. And your high gear, well, we're going to deal with that in your high needle, should I say, which is this bit here. We're going to deal with that in another video. So that's how you break your car in. Hopefully we'll see you later. Cheers.